Welcome back to another episode of Sabbath School Boot Camp, where my job is to help train Sabbath School teachers and front row students to get the most out of their class. Today, we are going to be looking at Lesson 13 of the Adult Bible Study Guide. It's called Ablaze with God's Glory. So grab your Bibles and your study guide because Sabbath School Boot Camp starts now. Today at Sabbath School Boot Camp, we are finishing up this quarter's lesson by hitting a hodgepodge of nice topics in Revelation. So let's begin by outlining this week. On Sunday, we are talking about what it means to watch and pray. On Monday, we're going to be talking about the nature and importance of truth. Tuesday is the need for us to be reformers in the last days. Wednesday is talking about the glory of God. And on Thursday, we discuss the centrality of Jesus as the Lamb and why this is the most important image of him in Revelation. And as always on Friday, I'm going to share some practical lessons that we can learn from all of this. Now, let's talk about how to teach this lesson. Ostensibly, this whole week is about the glory of God, and we're going to be talking about being reformers and the importance of truth, but the lesson doesn't do a great job tying these ideas to the glory of God. The teacher section does a little bit of a better job making these connections, which kind of goes like this. Revelation 18:1 says that an angel comes down from heaven with the glory of God, which lights up the entire earth. God's glory, or honor, has been challenged by Satan in this thing we call the Great Controversy, and at last, at the end of time, it is revealed for the whole world to see. God stands vindicated, and when we share the truth about who God is and call the world back to our Creator, we're honoring Him, we're giving Him glory, and there's no greater way of honoring God and giving Him glory than uplifting His Son. Now, if I were teaching this lesson, I'd emphasize the connection between the glory of God and the Great Controversy. Jesus repeatedly promised that He would one day return in glory, but He added in John chapter 8, "If I glorify myself, my glory is worthless." Now, the word glory is tricky. It can mean an overwhelming presence of God, or reputation, or fame, or honor, depending on the context. But the meaning of glory in light of the Great Controversy is that we ought to bring glory to God, and that the ultimate revelation of God's glory is proof of His vindication in the Great Controversy. When we believe the truth, it's not so that we can be right, it's so that God can be glorified by having a people who believe Him. When God's people uplift Jesus, it's to the glory of God. And so in light of God's future revelation of glory, let's do all we can to glorify God. So I'd recommend finding a thematic thread here because it's easy to teach this week as 5 separate topics. Find a way to connect all of this. You might even reach back into other lessons this quarter because this is the final week of the quarter. You can wrap all this whole quarter up, bring it home, make sure your class understands the heart of Revelation. Make sure that you emphasize Jesus. Okay, Sunday points us to 1 Thessalonians 5, where Paul warns the believers that the coming of Jesus will be as a thief in the night. Now, people will think everything is fine and that life is good. This seems to contradict what Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 24, that we should be watching for signs of the times to know when the end is near. Paul is telling us that no one will see it coming. They will be just as surprised as you would be to find a thief in your house in the middle of the night. But verse 4 tells us that believers in Jesus will not be surprised. We will see it coming. Paul says that Jesus' followers need to be awake even while others sleep. We shouldn't expect the world to see what we see. And when we point out that the signs of Jesus' return are near, we should expect the world to shrug it off and explain it away as if it's the same old, same old. Now, the same point is raised in 2 Peter, where the author tells us that scoffers will arise in the last days, saying, "Where is the promise of His coming? Because everything is continuing as normal." At the bottom of Sunday, the lesson asks us what Paul might have meant by saying that the world is sleeping. How do we know if we might be sleeping? Now, I don't know precisely what Paul meant, but I think of the night Jesus was arrested. Jesus asked His disciples to stay here and keep watch with me. We might think Jesus wanted the disciples to climb a tree and be a lookout, but after Jesus said, "Watch with me," He immediately started praying. By keep watch, might Jesus have meant for His followers to pray for and with Him? And after the disciples fell asleep, Jesus chastises them, "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." I do think there is room to watch by using our eyes to see the signs of the times, but we can misread the signs. Our eyes can make mistakes. Jesus shows us that waking and watching can mean connecting with God in prayer. And isn't that the truest way to know what's going on? On to Monday. I like how the lesson uses an Ellen White quote to show that the United States is actually the land beast in Revelation 13. Hello, this is the final week of the entire quarter, and you're finally talking about this, and you're not even going to bother to use a single Bible verse to demonstrate this point. Why even bring it up at this point? Anyways, the overall point of Monday is the importance of knowing the truth as a means of staying safe in the last days. Truth, in this case, is the opposite of the beast's deceptions. Truth, as the first angel says, is knowing who your creator is and living your life in harmony with that truth. Truth, as the second and third angels say, is seeing through the claims of the beasts and understanding that no matter their present power, their days are absolutely numbered. But truth is ultimately about knowing Jesus. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." To be ready for the end does involve correct ideas and beliefs. We should understand and believe that God, not the dragon, is our creator. That's the truth. That information matters. But knowing that truth means absolutely nothing if you're not ready to bravely live that truth. And that's where I think a lot of our discussions about the truth fall short. We're content with ideas, but ideas are not enough. Ideas are absolutely not enough. I believe that the Sabbath is true, and I don't have to live it. I can believe Jesus is the Son of God and not follow him. Once we find the truth, we must go in the direction it points us. So these are lowercase t truths, and they point us to the capital T truth, Jesus. We must know him. We must trust him. That's when we can say we really have the truth. Now, on Tuesday, we talk about God's people as reformers. So what text did this idea come from? No one knows. I don't disagree that we need to be reformers, but it's rather strange to hear these conclusions just come out of thin air. The lesson assumes these things are axiomatically true rather than, systematically studying a passage or a text in the Bible. If someone in class dared to ask what part of the three angels' message suggests that God's people ought to be reformers, what would you say if you were teaching that class? Well, you might say that the three angels are far more interested in revolution at this stage in Earth's history. They're not trying to reform the beasts. They are announcing their overthrow and downfall, okay? Where I think Reformation comes into play is in our ability to read Revelation 13 and 14 and anticipate the issues involved. If I know that in the end there's going to be confusion over who our Creator is, then I want to begin to angle my church toward acknowledging their Creator right now. And if I am in a church that is drifting further and further away from God as Creator, then I need to be a voice of reform in that congregation. This is just one example. Reform while you can before the revolution comes, my friends. That's what I would say. Now, at the bottom of Tuesday, the lesson says that the issue ultimately comes down to authority, and I think that's a very square way of putting it. Who responds well to being told, worship God because he's the authority? I mean, it's true, but anyone who plays that authority card, well, we want to tell them to go take a hike. What matters is that Revelation makes the case for God's authority. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's worthy of worship because Jesus died for us. He's worthy of worship because he's our Creator. He wipes every tear from our eyes. Look, I know God is God, and I know I owe him my allegiance as Creator. But let's not lose sight of the fact that the whole universe praises him, not just because he's God, but because he's good. He's not just Lord, he's love. And that is the real basis for his authority. That's what captivates our hearts. On to Wednesday, where we talk about God's glory as his character based on Exodus 33. I've always liked this idea. We often conceive of divine glory as this overpowering presence, which it is in places. It's something you can't look at, you can't stand to look away from. But in Exodus 33, it gives us some insight into why. Why can't Moses look at God's face and live? What will he see in God's face that will prove to be Moses' undoing? Have you ever met someone you really admire and you meet them and you sound like a total idiot in front of them? Like you struggle to put three words together? You're smart, but in their presence you just unravel and make a total fool of yourself. And I imagine that's similar, to being in God's presence, except, times a bazillion. He sees through us. We feel exposed. In his face, we see everything we are not. It's like the opposite of a mirror. His presence is reality itself. It's light, it's power. And I think we would just naturally fade to nothing because we're so insubstantial in comparison. I think God has this glory because of who he is, because he embodies all of the best things. So how do we give God glory? Well, Ellen White, quoted in the lesson, suggests that we give God glory by sharing the good news of his Son. Glory is often a synonym for fame in the Bible. We want to make God famous in this world by telling the world what he has done for us in Jesus. And as the lesson points out, when we give glory to God, that is giving credit and honor and praise to God, it means we aren't giving ourselves glory. And that's the important thing, because the dragon and the beasts are all about self-glorification. They aren't the creators, but they want the glory for it. They want the power and the glory of God without having to have the character of God. They want straight A's without having to take the class. But there's no glory in that. It's really shameful. It's as if they believe that these words have no meaning. Let's just say we created the world and it's just as good as creating it. Let's just say we're God and start demanding worship. It's just as good as actually being God. What? There's no glory without truth. Now, what I like about this appeal to Exodus 33 is how well it fits into our understanding of the last days. Everyone around the mountain saw darkness and lightning and were fearful of whatever was happening at the top of that. But Moses saw the glory of God. There was no darkness up there for him. And I think that'll be a similar experience for God's people in the end. Now, the lesson says that God's people should be concerned with the honor of God or his reputation. Are we more zealous to uphold God's reputation than our own? Are we making God known by telling the world what he has done? In the Me Too movement, people hold up signs saying, "Believe women." And when you believe someone's claims of having been assaulted, you're honoring them. When you listen without prejudice, you're honoring them. We might say, "Believe God. Listen to God." When we do this, we're honoring him. On Thursday, we discussed this prominent image of Jesus as the Lamb in Revelation. Why does Revelation depict Jesus as a lamb? Of course, this is sanctuary language. Jesus is the sacrificial lamb who died for us. This is the dominant image of Jesus throughout the book. Everything good that happens to God's people, every ounce of justice that is obtained, is all because Jesus is our sacrifice. There's an absurd contrast between the lamb and the beast. I mean, if you saw the lamb over here and then these beasts with their horns and claws and teeth over here, who are you putting your money on? Especially because the lamb is described in chapter 5 as looking like it had been killed. Maybe there's dried blood around the neck of this lamb. I don't know what John saw exactly, but come on, no sane person would expect the lamb to win this fight, but he does. So if you adopt a common sense, what you see as what you get approach to life, you're not betting on the lamb. You're going to be betting on the sea beast and the land beast, and you'll say, I better get in line to worship them because I don't see God anywhere. I don't think it's some great mystery why the world follows these guys. It defies the senses to say Babylon is fallen at the height of her power. It defies common sense to say a lamb can defeat these beasts and the dragon. Let's be honest, anyone who worships the dragon and goes along with Babylon are perfectly sane people. It's a decision not unlike the decisions we make every single day. We have to come to appreciate how normal it is to follow the dragon. People aren't going to go crazy and follow the dragon. They're going to be exactly what they all are right now. People making decisions based on the short term, not the long term. People using common sense based on what they see, not theoretical reasoning. People who take seriously the power in front of them, not some distant, far-off power. Those are all natural human things to do. It is God's people who have to live by faith, which is why when all the world wanders after the beast, we're going to be the ones who look crazy and maybe even wonder if we are crazy. It's a giant test of faith. It's what you believe to be real. It has to be more real than what appears to be real. Is the God you can't see more real than the beast you can see? Do you believe his promises more than you fear the beast's threats? The 144,000 are so honored in Revelation 7 because they live by faith despite every ounce, every instinct of common sense and self-preservation telling them to follow the beast. Now, the lesson rightly points out that we must intentionally place the Lamb that was slain at the very center of our doctrines and mission and at the heart of every sermon we preach. It's not enough to say something is Jesus-centered. Specifically, it has to be lamb-centered. That is, we focus on what Jesus did on the cross for us. Now, I don't think the lesson is overstating anything here. The Apostle Paul consistently challenged people to let the cross of Christ so permeate their lives that every decision they make is based on what Jesus did. So why do I show respect to my boss even though she's mean to me? Because Jesus died for me, and when I'm respectful, I honor him. Why do I make an effort to help someone I otherwise don't really care about? Because Jesus died for them and made them worthy of my care. When Potiphar's wife tempted Joseph to sleep with her, his very first thought was, how could I do this great evil against the Lord? Joseph recognized that while the sin was against himself or against Potiphar, it was first and foremost something that would hurt God. And we need to get to that level as well. It's all about him. It's all about him. Bring the lamb into every area of your life, not just on Sabbaths. Surrender to him. Let the work side of you accept the cross. Let the play side of you accept the cross. Let the social side of you accept the cross. Only when we fully surrender to God on the cross are we ready to make it through the end. Okay, Friday time. Let's apply. My takeaway from this lesson is summarized by 1 Corinthians 10:31. Whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God. This is so important because it speaks to our motivations. Am I preaching that Sunday isn't the real Sabbath because I just want to hammer those other Christians? Or do I love the truth because I like feeling right? Am I doing evangelism because I feel guilty? Something I've wanted to hammer home this entire quarter is that it's not enough to have the right answers or to do the right things. We have to do and say them and think them for the right motivations. Now, all of us do what we do with at least a little selfishness, and I think there is grace for our imperfect motivations, but we ought to seek to settle our motivations on a pursuit of God's glory. We seek the truth to glorify God. We reform ourselves and reform the church to glorify God. We uplift Jesus to glorify God. Everything should be about making him known and giving him the credit that he deserves. Thanks so much for watching Sabbath School Boot Camp with me this quarter. My friend Jim Merrills will see you next quarter on Ephesians. Be the same time, same place. Until then, class dismissed.